Our next guest, Sarah Hunstead, thank you for joining us, is a paediatric emergency nurse. You've done that for 15 years. You are the founder of CPR Kids and you have written a book, you're an author, called A Life, a Finger, a Pee Up the Nose.
I love it.
Yeah, now, I've got to start. How did you come up with the title for that?
Well, my 7-year-old daughter, when she was 2, she decided to put a pee up her nose because she wanted to save it for later. Because, of course, that's what you want to do when you're 2.
It kind of makes sense, and it's a handy little hole, isn't it?
It is, absolutely.
But look, Sarah, you would have seen so much in your time, particularly in emergency with kids. And as a mum, there's always those moments where you just freak out when something goes wrong with your kids. And you do a lot of CPR Kids, your company that you do is going around training people to be prepared for all of those things.
That's right.
What's one of the common mistakes parents make when it comes to their kids?
I think one of the first things that parents forget is that you actually do need to do a first aid course specifically for children. Just because you did your bronze medallion when you were 17 doesn't mean that you're going to know exactly what to do when your children are sick.
Just shortly, what is the difference between...
There are lots of differences. Firstly, children are not just little compressed grown-ups. That's not how they work. They're very, very different to us, and so that's why when doing CPR, we need to do different things with their head position, with the way that we give them breaths. There's lots of different things that we need to do. And with a grown-up, often what will happen is that when we get sick, we follow these signs and symptoms and we go to the hospital, but with children, they often will soldier on. They just, they don't feed properly or they're just not quite right, and that's what we need to look out for.
So being an emergency paediatric nurse for 15 years, that's quite impressive. What inspired you to start up CPR Kids?
So there were 2 little boys, both completely separate incidences, and the first one was a little boy who actually drowned in his backyard. He drowned in a water feature that Mum had actually emptied, but it was heavily raining and it had about that much water in there. And so she came and found him, blue, not breathing, and she immediately started CPR. And she screamed until the neighbours heard her and they called an ambulance, and his heart was actually stopped for 64 minutes.
Wow.
Which is a really, really long time, but he recovered. And, obviously divine intervention there, but his mum knew what to do. She started CPR immediately. So not only did he recover, but he's a completely normal little boy today.
Wow.
And that's because his brain never lacked that blood and therefore oxygen. Whereas we also had another little boy who came in whose care at the time didn't know what to do, and he had a very, very different outcome. And that's why I started CPR Kids, because what you do in those minutes before an ambulance arrives can directly impact the outcome of your child.
I've had a few scary moments with Elliot, my 1-year-old, where, he's starting solids and stuff like that, and he's just inhale and he's just and it's a scary moment.
Yep.
Do you have any tips on what happens when that's at that moment?
Absolutely. The first thing is you need to remain calm. But
Easier said than done.
I know. Absolutely. I mean, I should be the calmest person in the world, but when something happens to my children, I want to panic.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's exactly what I want to do. But how do you not panic? By knowing what to do, taking that deep breath and getting into that. So certainly when it comes to choking, prevention is, of course, one of the keys. So being able to chop up the food when you've got a little one. So one of the biggest culprits are grapes. So they're those lovely...
Yeah. Showing a laugh because I almost choked on a grape, but I was 16.
Yeah, so how old are you, Mary Ellen?
So they are dangerous even when you're older. Just saying.
Still slicing them up?
Yes.
That's right. Into quarters even when you're in your 20s.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So chopping up the grapes is really important. A grape is the perfect size to actually lodge into a child's airway. So being able to chop those into quarters, thinking about sausages too. We want to chop them up into those lovely little round circles to give our kids when they're little, because let's face it, kids love sausages. But thinking about that little round disc, perfect size to lodge in that airway again, give them the whole sausage, let them gnaw on it, let them do all of that. But anything that is that perfect spherical shape, that's a problem.
Yeah, I'm like Melody. Like, I had an incident with my daughter. She was under 1 at the time, and she'd put something in her mouth and she started to choke. And I did the whole pray, panic thing. I even got to the point where I called the ambulance because it was really stressing me out. I was yelling for help. Turned out the gag reflex kicked in and she was okay, and I called them back and cancelled it. But choking is such a big one. I know you've got your mannequin here today, your infant mannequin.
Don't pick your baby up like that either.
hoping you can sort of give us the right way to do the whole handling the choking thing with kids.
So first of all, gagging is completely normal. So that's one thing we need to recognise. A child who is gagging, they're not going to be panicked. They're going to look okay. They're going to have watery eyes or be a bit red, but they're going to be fine. They're going to cough it up. A child who is choking will be scared. They will have fear in their eyes. They can't clear their airway. So if your child has a strong, effective cough, we simply encourage them to keep coughing, because if we go to whack them on the back whilst they take a nice big breath in, we can potentially dislodge that object and they can inhale it further down. But if they have an ineffective cough, or they're silent, which is the really scary one, then we are going to pick them up out of the high chair or whatever it is that they're in. We're going to put them down over our legs so our leg is supporting them. We want to, because what we don't want to do is drop them on their head, because that's another set of problems we don't need at the time. We don't need to do that. So holding them supported, ideally a bit of gravity helping us, their bottom higher than their head, and between their shoulder blades with the palm of our hand, we're actually going to do some back blows. So it's not just a tap on the back, we're actually going to get in and, like a pendulum, up to 5 back
That's
blows.
quite strong.
Wow. Yeah.
It is. So up to 5 of these. Obviously, if it comes out after the first one, we don't need to do all 5. We
Good
may
tip.
want to, but we don't have to. However, if that doesn't work, we're going to turn them over again. Once again, supporting them so we don't drop them. For a small baby, we'd use 2 fingers.
Can I just quickly ask, do you want their head down or up or flat when you're doing it?
Ideally, a bit of gravity
Okay.
to help us is good, but, you know, if you've got a 4-year-old on your lap, you're not going to be able to do that. So 2 fingers for a little baby, or the heel of your hand for an older baby or an older child. Exactly where you do CPR, so on that hard breastbone, not on their tummy, because we do not do the Heimlich manoeuvre anymore. We're going to give up to 5 chest thrusts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If that doesn't help, straight back over into your back blows, and we continue 5, 5, 5 until either the object comes out or they become unconscious, where we're starting CPR, and that's why you need to do a first aid course.
The main thing that, just with what you're doing that, right? Like, the main thing that my first reaction is, that's really hard. I'm going to harm my child.
No,
But
absolutely. I guess the question is, what would you prefer, a bruised baby or a baby who's choked? I know what I'd rather have.
Wow, okay, that is quite confronting. So you go around doing this in all sorts of groups, mothers groups. Where do you do your CPR Kids and what you do?
So what we do is we go into maternity hospitals and teach in antenatal programs, but we also love coming around to families and mothers groups, and we do private sessions in home as well, because our mission is for every single parent and family member to know what to do to help their child in an emergency.
So if you were if someone was a non-profit organisation or had a mother's group or a church group or something, they could get in touch with you.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Every parent needs to have these skills.
Can I quickly, touch on fevers, because I know that's another big one for mums, and there's that debate out there. Let them have the fever because that's the body's way of fighting whatever it is. And others are saying, no, you got to, don't let them stress out. Give them a Panadol or something.
Absolutely.
What do you say?
The important thing to remember is if your baby's under the age of 3 months and they have a temperature of 38 degrees or above, they need to be seen medically very urgently, because they don't have the immune system that an older baby does. But if they are older, fever's a good thing. The body heats itself up to kill the virus or bacteria, but you can feel terrible. If you've had, a fever as a grown-up, you feel awful. If they are miserable, give them some Panadol, absolutely. But remember, it's not about lowering the temperature. It is simply about making them feel better. What we need to remember is, why do they have the fever? Fever is not an illness. It's simply a symptom of an illness. So it's about finding out what's the cause.
That's an interesting thing that you brought up there, that it's not meant to lower the temperature, because, that's the first thing I do. Oh, give him the Panadol so that his temperature comes down.
Yep, it's actually not necessary to do that, which is really interesting. So when we have a problem with our body temperature, if it gets too high, is when it's an external source, like, those marathon runners who run and heat their bodies up too much. So hypothermia, or a child who's been left in the car, that's really dangerous. But fever itself is self-limiting. It's controlled by the brain, so it's not actually dangerous. What's dangerous can be the illness that's causing it.
Yeah.
We have a tendency to use like sponge baths for fevers or that kind of thing. Is that necessary?
No, it's simply about keeping the child in cool clothing. So whatever you're comfortable in, you know, maybe it's just a loose, comfortable clothing in a nappy if they're young. And it's simply about if they're miserable, give them some Panadol.
Well, thank you, Sarah. Thanks so much for sharing your wisdom and your knowledge. Your book, A Life, A Finger, A Pea Up the Nose. Where can people get that book?
So that is in all good bookstores and also available online.
No worries. Thanks again. Thank you so much. Well, look, you can jump onto our social media. You can have your say on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel, or just follow us on Instagram. We will see you next time. See ya. Bye.